Now what we've done here is we've got a lot of the green and tomato waste out of the big factory in Gyra and used it over a lot of these paddocks. It had come in and we just spread it, and I can show you I sold my spreader and the big tractor doing it because lots of other people woke up after nearly 15 years that it was an excellent idea, and I've had a lot of competition for it. When I was getting it for free, I was quite happy to use it.
Right.
I had no intention of fighting anyone for it because I'd done most of mine by the time they woke up. This property was only been owned, we're the second owners since settlement. It's Simmons Road, named after the family that took the country up, and there's still actually a Simmons up the end.
Oh wow.
But the Simmons were sheep people, hence the shearing shed. This old shearing shed we're coming to down here, see this little old shed on the side?
Yeah.
That was the first shed in this part of New England, built to shear sheep, and that would have been all blade shearing in those days, no machine shearing. It would have converted later on in its life to a machine because there's an old engine thing in the side. Well, when we got here, this country had had the sheep full time on it for so long that it was very like this road. We also hit it with 3 years of the first 2 years were half the average rainfall, and the third year was that major drought where we got less than a third of our annual rainfall. And so we couldn't, we knew for up our work at Morden what we had to do to make the soil work. We had to get the roots deep, the pastures thick, round the clock, 24/7, 364. We had to have plants on soil with photosynthesis being managed through that holistic grazing. And but that wasn't any good in a drought. We couldn't get the growth,
Yeah.
and we didn't have the carbon there to hold anything that came quick. It just all ran off. And so we've really only had 2 years of good going to get this place going. We just drove past the paddock. We'll have a look on the way back, but that's my probably premier paddock, that one back there. And it's interesting to know that paddock, the little farm here we're on, is called Barley Hill, and that's a reflection of the fact that in the late 1800s, for several years, they grew gold medal winning barley crops. You got the shearing shed? That would have had a bark roof on it originally. Now, see that pile of gunk over there? That's a bit of the old green waste we were getting.
Okay.
Every now and then I'll show the tomatoes. I'll just leave this one open for a minute, and we'll go down here and show you the way the timber's coming back. I'll just make a point, Tamsin, that you mightn't immediately relate to it, but if you pan round these trees,
Yeah.
they're all mature, big trees. There's no little trees, and those trees are probably 80 years old. What's happened is that the grazing has been so savage for so long that the sheep have taken out all those little trees emerging without the rest. And without the other pastures growing well enough to sustain those numbers that they wanted to run.
Yeah, you see that a lot, don't you?
Yeah. Well, sometimes you don't put your finger on what's wrong. This should be all a koala, habitat through here, and I want it to become one of the corridors with islands of public land somewhere so that the bear can move through it right round but ring the city. And this is the image we want for this city again, not the mess it is now with all the bright people sort of fighting each other, it's sort of. And my neighbour over here, great old bloke, but he's a very traditional guy. He said to me not long ago, because every time we get a good fall of rain, that 12 mils an hour thing starts kicking in. He's got a flood across this valley here, and he looks over into me and there's no water. He can't see a drop of water anyway. And he said, I don't know what's going on. I must be getting more rain than you. He didn't understand that it's that tightness and that pact and that carbon, lack of carbon. And he's at the end of his career. There's no point in me upsetting him, and because when you think about it, these people that have put their super out and done everything that they thought was the right way of doing it and done their grazing the way they were told to do it, the same people that taught them all that were the people that fought the holistic stuff coming in from Africa. You're probably aware of the fact that when Terry got going in Rockhampton at Yeppoon, I think it was 9 people from the top of the DPI ag areas went overseas, were given money to go overseas and research everywhere that this method had failed, to come back and report on something they'd decided before they left.
Wow.
And we now just look at the different sort of thing. You know, what right did they have to take that on without doing the research? You know, and that's the attitude that this holistic stuff hit. Now, we started to talk about it up there. I'll finish it now for you. I've moved on with that training of that community involvement and engagement and cooperation, the win-win stuff, the win-win-win-win stuff. I wouldn't fight those people up there. I wouldn't waste my time rubbishing them or starting more fights that just keep this thing that's now been going 30 years when the evidence is here before your eyes. Waste of time. I wouldn't, while I don't agree with the modern superphosphate and its effect on soils and the bottom of our dams, the heavy metals that come down that are washed down, the blue-green algae that grows, all those things, I can sit here and argue and argue and argue, but I don't have a list of figures after my bloody name that says, why would you listen to that bugger? So I'm much more interested with my community development stuff to say, well, keep doing it, but we've got to now put zeolite. When you're putting your super out, we have to put zeolite and we have to put biochar and we have to put a couple of these things that aren't raising your cost too much, and you can put a ticket on that. But we've got to start getting that infiltration. You've got to start getting this type of result. See, my cows are away giving this a bit of a holiday at the moment, but they're stopping my neighbours burning me out because with these seasons they'll be dry grass in another 2 months, all up here and all round. Not this fella, he keeps right on top of his own dry grass. But that's the scenario if we don't start understanding all this stuff. And it's too late in the day to fight, saying I'm right, you're wrong, I'm right, you're wrong stuff. It's give them a role in there to add something to the look at the water there.
Yeah.
That's 22 mils last night.
Now, would you say you're at full saturation then?
Yeah, we're full saturation.
Yeah.
This guy's most of that water that we got last night will run off, but not much. You can hear it squelching under our tyres. It'll quietly go in today, and I haven't lived here yet through this higher carbon era to know how good this country can be. But I have an inkling when those people in the late 1800s were winning gold medals for their barley crop, but it hasn't happened ever since. You know, it's sort of once we got after the Second World War in Australia with the chemistry overrunning the use of the biology. We forgot about carbon, we forgot about all those things, and we forgot about the microbes and fungi having a role of the breakdown, the release of all these things. And see, those little trees have grown, but they've either rung barked them or killed them or done something about them so they didn't get too thick. Because the view was that timber actually took all the moisture and the good out of the soil, and you had to thin it or keep it down. Well, my experience is my best pastures are under. I'll show you a couple on the way back. You can see nice big rings around the trees where the best action is.
Yeah.
And I think it's fungal activity as much as anything.
Yeah.
Now over here, as we go along Tamsin, see the without me planting them, see the resurgence and the return of the little eucalypts coming. They're becoming quite thick. I'll just run down here a little bit. I think the other guy's still doing everything right as far as the super and all that sort of stuff goes, but it's that keeping the foot on the throat of that growth gives you a fence line like that. And
yeah, and you can just see the difference in lack of species over there, and
well, look ahead of you down the fence line there. It's pretty stark what's happening.
last time you had cattle on this one?
About 2 weeks.
2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
For how long?
They'd be 2 days in here.
Okay.
Now just ahead of you again, you'll see the regrowth and the eucalypts.
Oh yeah.
And that's happening in most of our paddocks. And not before time, Tams. Look at the big trees that have gone
Yeah.
in the drought. Who knows what was caused, drought or whatever.
Yeah.
But I needed that succession in my timber. And there's quite a few trees. I'll show you another different one up the other end here, where they're. This to me is a highlight of it all. It could be to the point where I'll need to thin them a little bit later on, but that's certainly probably out of my lifetime worry, that one. I'm not a good person on the local trees, but there's obviously those big round leaf ones there.
Yeah.
And just out the window now, you've got that little guy there. That's a different sort. Some little finer leaf ones. So we're getting a number of species coming back.
So have you introduced the clover?
Some of it's been around all the time. There's you'd have to be a much more clover expert person than I am. There's some native or local little guys here. There's I think that's a red clover. Then you'll see that this is what's always called white clover. And as it gets healthier, this grows more. And as the nitrogen starts working in the soil, the grasses thrive and come up through it a lot better. These are probably manure spots you can see in these spots over here. And you can see how it's really gone silly.
Yeah, right, okay. So that's the clover likes that high nitrogen then.
Everything's coming through from that manure because we're probably feeding a little bit of multimin in the lick and that sort of thing. But the other thing that's making a big difference for us is these deeper rooted plants. Chicory is a ripper. Some of these are chicory. There's so many types of this stuff. I'm not sure what I'm looking at. That red type, there's another type of plant, I think. This is chicory, this one here, I'm pretty sure. They're the ones that grow up and have a nice blue flower on the top.
Yeah.
They've been used for years in coffee and medicines and all sorts of things, the roots of those.
And they go down, don't they?
Yeah, they've got a very deep taproot.
I think this one's plantain.
And we found on some of the tight farming paddocks, this paddock we've just driven through is not a farming paddock, and neither are any of these ones are the trees because there's too much rock in them. As we go over there, that's all farming country over there. Wherever you see trees, big mature trees, it's rocky and there's no farming going on.
Oh, okay.
But wherever it's been farmed, we're finding that this chicory and plantain, that's plantain, that one,
Yeah.
they're all very necessary to start opening that soil up. The other grasses that would have come out here are the prairie grass, this tall one with the top on it, that's ryegrass there. These things are all slowly recovering.
So that one's ryegrass.
Yep.
And then, what did you say?
This is prairie.
Prairie.
This is the chicory getting a better, as you go over here away from that tight corner, you're seeing the chicories and things grow a little bit better.
Yes.
That's a good example.
So you're saying, so you didn't plant though?
Yeah, now I've run them out, just
Okay.
scattered that seed
Okay.
to mix in with this local stuff to try and open that soil up that's got so tight after those years and years of packing. You can't graze something like that for 50 years, or in this case over 100 years, and not expect it to be fairly packed.
Yeah.
So the soils have to get opened again, because no matter what we put on the top, if we can't get that infiltration and that aeration going, we're terribly prone to be running into drought all the time.
So the compaction is not necessarily the mineral imbalance, but it's just the constant...
It's a combination of a lot of things, not just the physical pressure, it's the lack of carbon. It's the lack of the actions of the fungi. The fungi could probably go through rock, you know. They're magnificent, you know. But their breakdown. There's two subjects we're talking about here. There's the one that's taught about you can only build a tiny little bit of soil, you know, a fraction of an inch in 1,000 years, versus people like Joel Salatin, who said he's put 6-8 inches of soil on bare rock. in 30 years in where he is in farming over. I heard him say that in Australia. So when I visited Joel, he'd forgotten I'd listened to him in Australia. I said, Joel, we're walking around the paddocks looking at all the marvellous things he does. And I said, Joel, where's this place you put the 8 inches of soil? Huh? You know about that? And I said, yes, I heard you talk about that in Australia, Joel. He said, well, it's strange you should ask because it's about 30 metres or 30 yards behind you in American. And and that was the result of all this carboniferous material on the top. It's all the action of that fungi and the microbes under the soil, breaking those things down. So it wasn't weathered rock we're talking about with those tiny little scientific fractions that take 1,000 years to get there. This was a whole different ball game of using the biology and the photosynthesis and all sorts of things to add to it.
Yeah.
It made it a totally different ball game.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's great because we've got soil restoration farming with Rochelle and Justin Armstrong. They've got thought leaders that come in every month.
Yep.
And I've just done one with Joel.
Yep.
And he's just fantastic to listen to.
Well, Joel turns what we might have learnt in university, he turns that on its head and shows you there is something another here before you get carried away with that angle. And as some scientists would say, oh yeah, but he hasn't shown us that, 8 inches of weathered rock. But no, but soil, the soil's many, many, many things, it's sort of...
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's the thing. And one of the reasons I love Australia is because there are so many different variables.
Yeah, that's a little native. This one for some of those Y weeds, the J. Makim type people. This one over here. This will be a little that yellow flowered little bloke will be an indication probably of a calcium problem there. And this is where we talk about instead of spraying the weed, deal with the problem that weed's trying to fix.
Yeah.
It's trying to increase the calcium breakdown in the soil.
Yeah.
And if we help that weed do the job, the weed's out of a job, it's sort of, and something else comes along and takes over. This corner on this little ridge here is fairly tight.
Yes, you can see the difference.
It's different as you go down away from the ridge here.
Yeah.
But we'll go for a run down through. I'll shove those cattle out of that paddock, and I want to take you up the other end because up against that house over there is our boundary that way.
Yeah.
And there's another great example of those trees just going crazy out in the old farm, in the new farm country. So one of the things that's helped me a lot with all this is having a mind that doesn't mind crossbreeding, that is capable of looking at hybrid vigour and looking at the benefits of not saying I'm all that animal. I'm taking some parts of that animal and some parts of that animal to come to produce another animal, and that's why David's project with these red wagyu appealed to me. It was.
So the genetics is a big thing for you then?
Yeah, and it is out in the pastures as well to get that diversity in here, because every one of them has got a different set of microbes and fungi that are working with them under the soil. So the more we bring to the party, the faster we get our soil recovering and digesting a lot of the sins of the past ag and grazing. That's a little bit of an example of what I'm saying over there. See the ring of really good pasture around that tree? Yeah. We learnt this up in the Gulf. We had bohemia trees up there that were dusty and bare, and we sort of used to have the mindset that it was dusty and bare because that tree took all the moisture and the good out of the soil. Yeah. And no, it grew sweeter, better plants, and the cows in set stocking flogged it bare and lived there all the time eating that good plant. And we're finding similar down here. When we manage the pressure of our grazing, suddenly the best pasture is under the trees.
Yes.
The trees weren't the problem, it was our stock management. I think you'll see it again here. See the different types of good, big, strong grasses growing there? Yeah. And it's in the ring or the area of that tree. It's in the shaded area of that tree that better pasture is coming, and it's coming out. And I think a similar sort of story, Tamsin, is along the main road where no management happens, nothing, no tomato went on, no grazing happened, when my place is starting to look like the side of that road in better order because I mow it oftener, I'll know I'm going somewhere, you know.
Yeah.
I've got a long way to catch up to nature. Now the reason this is a bit healthier and stronger here, because often the tomato would be dumped, the tomato waste would have been dumped in here, and that would be getting more nutrient than a lot of the other country we're going through.
Well, this one here is different completely. I haven't seen this one.
Which one?
This wispy stuff.
The white one, the little white one, the little tiny one. Foxtail. Yeah, that's as far as grazing goes, it's a bit of a weed. Cattle don't like it.
Okay, but it's more here than back there.
Yeah, it probably came in a bale of hay or came here, and it's an introduced problem. I'm just going to shut this gate and we'll go down through over here and we'll get behind those cows. There's hardly any pasture that goes round the clock all the time. Most of them have their seasons, and right now we're starting to see the sort of plants you'll see in a dairy farm where there's nice paspalum starting to come back, and some other plants, and it's that soil succession thing that we're on about. There's fescues and all sorts of things coming along. And the more the better, because of the different undersoil things that are going on with all that party that's coming from all those plants. That's one of the big heavy perennials there we're just driving over. Paspalum suddenly getting going. It's a summer type plant. See this guy here, this thick grass here? We won't find, that's paspalum. We won't find that in the winter time. That's the summer one that's just coming.
Okay.
A few little ones starting to show up here. We no longer stress about something that looks like it's too thick or something else is too thin. We just keep improving that soil and letting nature's succession take over.
Yeah.
And it seems to be always heading into better plants.
So you set up this gate system so you can. There's one trough for 4 different paddocks.
Oh look, when we did this in the outback, we used 2 wires. But down here, if I want to mess around with sheep in my old age, I don't want to be worrying about sheep getting out or cattle getting out. So we only had a little place to develop. This is overkill for expenditure for the amount of stock we did, but it's also ease of peace of mind with living nearly in suburbia, with town dogs and all other sort of things that add to the mix of living so close to civilization. My cattle dog, he's absolutely useless, which means that I'm not a good dog trainer. Keep your knees in for the splash.
That's okay.
We'll just get that there. We're through. Now over here, that pile of they're red tomatoes that we said to the factory when we first started getting these about nearly 15 years ago. We said, why don't you start up a business or let a business start up that turns these into chutney or tomato sauce or something or other? Why do we have to have this terrible waste of dumping them in a paddock for cows to eat? Because there's nothing wrong with the tomatoes when they came in.
Yeah.
And anyway, that's the deal. Now the reason there's a few blacks, even though they're all by red Wagyu, the reason there's a few blacks here is we're just comparing that centre pole background to an Angus background as we do this. Normally with my cows I just go to a gate and call and they're all waiting to go. If he was taller he'd get his head kicked off.
Yes, that was pretty close. Oh well, he can move them though.
But the trouble is we haven't brought this down to when I want him to do it.
Oh, okay.
Well, we're not that
Timing's
well trained.
not good.
Timing's a bit out. You'll see some of those little red heifers there that have natural poles, and that's where we're going with that fine coat, keeping with the here, come here.
Do you want me to get him?
Yeah. Here, hop in.
Stay.
Oi.
Whatever you do, stay. I know you want to see.
Now, the black bull is he's by a black Wagyu over one of those crossbred Angus cows, and his calving is pretty easy. So he gets the girls to start with. They're looking at your camera. How about that?
Oh, is that what it is? I was going to say, they're not really all that keen.
I might give them a hunt through. Fancy that, nervous of that camera.
Yeah, amazing.
Hasn't been grazed reasonably long ago. We'd have on this 220 acres probably 130 or 40 head of cattle, and that changes as the intake of calves get dropped and the last lot grow up and stay here for a bit longer and go again. You know.
And how many paddocks have you got?
Oh, look, I'll count.
Let's count.
There'd be 14 on this side, I think, and there's four major ones over on that side over there,
And how big are they? They're quite big, aren't they?
Yeah, they're quite big, and that's why if you look at this gate design here, if I was a bit more younger and a bit more energetic, I'd probably divide now that I'm getting good pasture in here, I could divide a hot wire out here and down the middle, you know, so that I'd split this paddock into two grazers.
Yeah.
And I would get much better results out of these paddocks that way. But look, I'm 74 and I'm not that mad about increasing my workload. You know, I came down here to semi-retire. You know, but I still love doing this, and I still love messing with the improving this worn-out soil and getting it going again. And apart from those, a little bit of calcium prill, a bit of boron, some humates, that tomato product. That's the only artificials that have happened here. And where I've driven with my little, you can actually see it down on the flat there, Tamsin. If you look down on that flat beside that dam, you'll see those like brown strips on the ground. That's where I would have driven with my little fertiliser spreader, chucking out seed.
What are the brown strips?
Well, that's probably we find it pretty quick around here if we just look for a bit of that brown grass. That mostly is prairie grass, I think. Some of those other grasses that are introduced.
And that was with boron and calcium.
Yeah, and we just throw them out there. 12 or 15 different pasture species. When I say pasture species, herbs, legumes and grasses, some perennials that go in that mix, and they take their chances of what happens. And sometimes I don't see them for 12 or 18 months after I've put them out, and then suddenly bang, they're there. And we're not sure in the succession of this soil improvement what their role will be or how long it'll be. But they're certainly increasing our carrying capacity, and that helps us get that animal pressure and that stocking density and that sort of thing going. And at the same time, we're just starting to see some decent animal performances coming out of it. Those heifers look great coming out of winter. Those cows down there have just had a calf and they're rolling fat, you know.
Yeah.
You can hear the frogs getting going there. That's a new thing for us.
Wow.
We haven't heard many frogs since we lived here. That's a water for every paddock, yeah.
Yeah,
It
so-
could be, if I ran a line off the middle there, well, instead of being at 4 paddocks, we'd turn into 8 paddocks out of this system. And it could come to that, Tamsin, when these pastures get good enough. See, I don't know what my, if I say something's getting better, I don't know where the top is, you know. It's sort of, we're still succeeding.
Yeah.
This is burnt coal, where they've been using heaters in the it's just more carboniferous sort of material, just to stop it being boggy around the trough.
So burnt coal.
Yeah, they've had heaters in their tomato factories up there.
Oh, so still from the same factory.
Yeah,
Wow.
this paddock's had me drive around on it with these pasture mixers and.
That white flower. That's one I haven't seen. You see, you've got a cluster up there, and
The paper daisy, the artificial daisy. It's got a long way to go, but feel if it's crispy. The flower.
oh yes,
Does it feel crinkly?
yeah.
Yeah, that's that. We call it paper daisy. It's just. Yeah, I think in hindsight to what we're looking at, those brown strips down there is this. See this purpley looking seed here? I think that's what we're looking at down there.
So is that
And that's called prairie grass.
is that a perennial?
Yeah, it's well, it could be an annual, but it works round the clock sort of thing, you know.
And what's this other one?
Which one?
Yeah.
Don't know what that is. Couldn't tell you.
I'm not so
It looks like a native.
which perennials did you actually see?
Well, there'll be phalaris, there'll be cocksfoot, some of the fescues.
Oh, okay.
There's
And they're also known as the native grasses then as well, are they?
not anymore. No,
Oh.
I think they're still classed as
improved.
yeah.
Ah,
And look at the way this clover's going mad because of this cool weather.
yeah.
Just look at this rock there. This cool weather, it's still all performing like it's just coming into spring. We didn't see it down there driving along Tamsin, but that's 2 more loads of tomato over. See those 2 brown marks in the middle there?
Oh yeah.
That's where 2 more loads. And it ends up becoming a very fertile, heavily grown area, you know, it's sort of.
Yeah. I can't believe they eat tomatoes.
Oh, they go crazy. They come trotting when the bloody truck rolls in, you know. But see those tree lines, that hawthorn tree line? That was one of the original fencing ideas in this country, where they used those hawthorns as the fence line.
Because that's from England.
Yeah, bloody
Yeah.
hell. See up there? One there too. That line along our road there. They're a real pain because the seeds of these hawthorns get carted all over the place.
Yeah, well,
But, they've got them sort of almost historically protected at the moment because they were one of the original ways of fencing here. There were no waters here when we got here like this. We ran the water all over the place. We sank another bore, and when I found out what the town water was like, I cut it off. But what we would have known in the early days, why this is so bare and flogged down up here, is the sheep would have camped on the top of the hill here in the old days.
okay.
So their pressure would have been even heavier up here than it was all down in the other places, you know. So we found that was probably the place to put a water and start recovering it. But I started to tell you before, those cows will be coming back tomorrow or the next day, depending on how quick this paddock runs out. And they'll come over into the other side, down through past the green tank over here and onto here, and then back into the rotation.
Yeah, okay.
And we try and time our calving like now, so the calves well off, probably April, May, the calves will be gone. So the cows got a month or 2 to pick up a little bit of weight again to go into the cold winter.
Right.
And this is this year and last year the first time that I've had any pasture to talk about. So we don't know how good a job that'll do or what'll happen. But the calves start dropping just as the winter's ending, sort of thing. Well, it didn't end this year, but about early August, we're expecting our calves to be dropping because for the first 3 weeks they drink stuff or milk. There's only a little bit of recovering pasture, so there's not a massive pressure on the cow to produce a lot of milk. But as the season kicks away in early September, late August, early September, we want to have that cow going like mad, is that with her production and the calf's growth and everything. So the calf's getting milk, it's getting grass, the cow's getting the whole deal,
Right.
and the whole show works better. And then, you know, we let them drift through the season till the calf's up here around about 250, 300 kilos, and they're off and back into the production for the next year, sort of thing, you know. So, yeah, everything's gravity fed with a pump backup, sort of thing, you know. So, it's a pleasure to some young fella from the outback who came in here and had country that would work with me.
It comes from that water tank.
That tank will gravity feed down the rest of it.
Okay. And that tank is pumped from a bore.
Bore's behind the house over there. So you can see the way the young trees are coming.
Yep.
And they seem to be a different species here to the finer leaf ones here.
Ah, so you didn't plant these?
No, these are all just coming up on their own accord.
Okay.
I don't see the point in me planting trees if nature will do it for me.
Yeah.
But what's interesting up here further, Tamsin, is not just the way they're coming up. Look at the age of this one already. That was a little tiny tree when we put the fence in. So they're still coming up and they're still thickening. It's much more obvious up here a little bit how well the trees are spreading out into this paddock. And this would have been hard farmed for 120 or 30 years probably. This is farming country,
Right.
not grazing country. And you can tell that by the fact there's absolutely no trees in it. But look at how fast they want to come back. And here's where they're starting to come through into the fence here, see? Out here.
Yeah.
Now there's a very good example of what we're saying about around the tree, Tamsin.
Yeah.
If you look with your discerning eye at this circle here about the edge of these leaves,
Yeah.
all around there and even more through the fence, but even out here, you can see the big perennials coming, the big perennial grasses. It's where they're really starting to sneak through the fence. I'm wanting to get shade back in this paddock, and they're obviously not planted by me, they're just so thick. We could probably get to a stage, Tamsin, where I pull the fence down and put it back in over on the boundary again, you know, and let the cattle graze in under them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I've got to wait till they get up above where they can hurt them. They're coming out, I think there's two behind us, they're now coming out over the road here. And I don't need them coming out all over the paddock, but I want to, and these corridors I'm talking about,
Yeah.
the corridors to carry the bear through me and keep on going to other people, you know. So if we get some management, some incentives, some thinking, some cooperation, we can all do these things and still have our places in our production, you know.
Yeah.
This is lovely in the corner here. See the trees are this far out now.
Yeah.
And that's only, you know, after 3 years of drought. Imagine in 10 years' time what that'll all look like. It's sort of 2 years of good seasons has done that.
Well, that's it. When the conditions are right, boom, everything's just explodes here, doesn't it?
Yep. This paddock's coming along nicely. It's starting to do sort of things I'd like to see. It's got
I don't think I've ever seen this much clover in Australia.
No, it's beautiful. When I got here, this paddock had see this big guy here. This is one of the big grasses. See the big broadleaf fella, not the little spiky one, the other one. That's Phalaris or Coxfoot or one of those. And when I got here, they were only up on the top of the paddock here. Now they're down to the next fence, and that's the description. See that big fella there? There's a little clump of it all around there. That's what you were saying a while ago when you put something up the top and it bloody percolated its way down.
Yeah.
You don't have to spend a huge amount of money. You just got to get the basics right, and the rest, nature will do the rest for you.
Yeah.
If you're wanting to rush the whole thing, it's not going to rush faster than you fix that soil up.
Yeah.
And because that's using the mentality of going back and using too much of artificial input. Now, a conventional person will say about your pictures here today, oh, of course the country would look all right because he hadn't got any cattle on it. But that's because the cattle are just down the road keeping my fire danger back. And they'll be back here within a couple of days into this system again. They've only been gone for a week. Well, the season.
And that's such a funny thing to say. Like, that immediately made me laugh because I haven't been trained the conventional way, so a lot of it doesn't make any sense to me. So when you say something like that, but I'm not meaning to be rude, it's just, wow, would they really say that?
Yeah, they would, yeah. Oh, of course his country would look all right, he's got no cattle, you know. Tamsin, the other thing about the tomatoes, and the tomato waste, it wasn't essential, but it was timely that would cut my waiting time down to recover the country. As soon as the soil dries out a little bit more, I'll bring the tractor down, just push it out onto the paddock. I went to Elaine Ingham and learnt to make compost, learnt to know all the benefits of compost, learnt to know all about what's going on in the soil. Being a good American, she had basically had us back there using big machinery, tractors, making the compost and using it for a good purpose and using the waste for good purposes. But in the end, we were still using a lot of fuel and we were using big machinery. And a guy called Mel Landers, I don't know if you've come across Mel, he's in Nicaragua, out of America, but he is an American. He said to me, why do you go to the trouble of making all that, that time and effort and fuel and everything else making compost? He said, if you put those materials straight onto your paddock, you'll get 80% of the result you got with making the compost every time, and I said, oh, thanks, Mel. I never argue with a bloody scientist that sounds like he's making sense, and that sounded good. So I've stopped making compost immediately, and for the last at least 10 years we've been just putting it straight on the country. But now you're looking at the bad time. I've already done all that. When that transition, when it looked like this ground here, that was the time to see it, when to see how it came along. And now I've got the roots, the photosynthesis, the whole deal's happening. I don't care if they take that stuff away.
I just love that whole composting in situ, because for me, you want to do the right thing, but there's a certain degree of capability depending on how steep your country is, and so for me to just be able to get it as high as I can and to dump it as a compost heap there, it's worked for me and I'm just loving it. Well,
everyone's got to adapt this message. That's why I've read so widely. I've been on the biodynamic board because I knew nothing about it for Australia. I've tried to absorb so much of this stuff, and when I read Sir Albert Howard, his book An Agricultural Testament, there's wonderful information in there from 1935, circa then, and I realised how we've been taken off beam to help other marketing for so long, which has done absolutely nothing for our soils or our health or anything else. And this whole system is coming back towards clean, but they've even designed this breed of cattle that have got to have all the highly industrial feed to finish the cattle, and that's where the big price is. Well, I don't know if I'll live long enough or succeed, but I'm very interested in David Wright's last efforts to grow this animal that will finish on the grass. And to do it, we have to get the grass right, and to do that, anybody with half a brain now knows we've got to get the soil right. Now, they're not bad order for cattle coming out of the winter. You'll see how wild they are in a minute. They went in here yesterday, and they'll bully me for another paddock, and they won't get it till I'm ready to give it to them. I'm the judge of the paddock, not them.
Look at the size of them.
But I do take their advice. If they galloped over here too quickly, I'd have another look at the paddock and say, yes, I think you're right, girls, and we'll try that gate open and put them back in my place. Come up to the gate here, they'll come over to us. This yellow one I call Foghorn. She comes up and puts her head in the vehicle and shouts at me. This old girl here. Foghorn's this one here with the yellow tag.
Is she the matriarch?
Oh, she'd like to think so, but she's got a bit of competition. I'd say that's a bit of competition.
So these are...
They're probably second and third cross. red Wagyu, if I find a purebred one, there's a few purebreds in there, I'll show you.
So when you say second or third...
See M9 just there, she's getting close to pure if she's not pure. There's another yellow one right out the back over the back with the white tags coming forward now.
Yeah.
She's a full-blood red or purebred red Wagyu.
So when you say cross, what are they?
Well, that's the centre pole. Originally centre pole cows. There's no pure centre pole cows left here now. They're originally centre pole cows with red Wagyu genetics over them, and we're keeping that bit of black in through there.
Yeah.
That cow P17 there, I think that's her. She's a descendant of one of my cows from Arizona at Julia Creek, and she's here to let me know how flash all this southern stuff's going. You know that she's a couple of crosses over since that time of good Angus, and the other cows. See that big P4 over there? Her mother was a long line of very good Angus cows that we bought, developed by the Credlin family at Morden. And so as time goes on, we'll process a few of these calves. We eat them ourselves every year, one or two, and when they're grown up, we keep a steer behind out of a line that we like, and that'll be our meat for the year. But the major things that we want to bring forward is that high eating quality, off grass. They've got to do it on grass, and better conformation and muscle than the black Wagyu. We're going to lose out. There's a trade-off point there between the marbling capacity, but then it's got to happen off grass. So that's why we're back trying to keep the grazing side. For most of Queensland, we want these finer coated cattle with polled heads because it's too difficult nowadays to worry about dealing.
Oh, so they naturally don't have horns?
They don't have horns, no.
Ah, that's what you call them, polled
But
heads.
the quicker we go up towards the full bloods, the faster we get back into the horns. See that cow out on the outside over there? She's got horns,
Oh, yeah.
and it's a trade-off and a selection thing all the time. That's what I say. I'm not sure that I'll be around long enough to do it, but if somebody else can, they can carry it on if they want to. But by that time, we'll know if it's working. And when we talk about crossbreeding, there's absolutely no reason these can't be a sort of a half. You have a line of these cows and then a black Angus bull over them, and that bull, his progeny, then go to the other Wagyu, the marbling Wagyu. There's all sorts of ways to. If you're not fixated on your result, you can play with it and play with it and play with it.
So, if you are fixated on the result, what is it that they're doing, or think? What's the line of thinking?
Well, the line of thinking here is to end up not needing to feed in a feedlot for a reasonable eating result. The top line eating result that they want for the top thing in Japan, it's always going to be in that feedlot, unless we can really perfect this mobile feed going around the paddocks.
Okay, yes.
If you had someone producing organic grain then, and you could use their cast off, the gratings that come out of that grain,
Yeah.
to feed animals on, so there wasn't any loss to the other systems, I don't see any reason why that wouldn't be a good acceptable product on the good pasture we've just driven around,
Yeah.
which is getting better. That's only 2 years on the journey yet. That's got 10 years to go probably.
Yeah.
Then we can talk about how we fiddle with that last bit, and that last bit's only a small fiddle, and it will be fiddled according to the demand and the price that's there to drive it. But there is a growing market, a hugely growing market. Have you ever visited Vic's Meats in Sydney?
No.
They've got a big retails place in the city, but Jude visited their big thing out at Mascot, and she knew immediately when she got there that it was a very different butcher shop. When she saw 3 or 4 of the butcher's cars were big black Mercedes, she said, "This is different." So in she goes, she meets the boys. While she's in there, this guy comes in pushing a trolley with a heap of bloody big eskies, And she said to one of them, what's all this about? Oh, he's the providor for a wealthy person in Singapore. He's sent down here on a plane every week to fill the eskies for their meat in Singapore. You can imagine the value of that. Now, that guy is not going to quibble over one of these special products that takes him to another level for all these reasons.
Yes.
And there's got to be the environmental, there's got to be the health, there's got to be the whole story.
Yep.
I'm way back at the early days, not in a big enough way to make a huge difference to that, but it's easy nowadays to multiply this story if people find the market's there and the demand's there. And that's the Arizona here. She's walked up here to look, see the bit more Bosindicus look about the keel underneath. You know, she's got the navel on her, the black cow.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Well, that's just, she's had all sorts of breeds. See, I had 6 breeds in a 3-way cross.
Oh.
And she will have, in her background will be Thule and Baran, all these other cattle we were working with up there. And I want to use that as a cross-reference to see how far ahead or behind we are with all this other work we're doing here.
Wow. So has she had a calf?
Oh, she's the granddaughter of one I bought. She's the daughter of a cow that we basically brought down here. And she's had,
she can't
every year she has calves.
Oh, she does.
Yeah,
Okay. So has she got one in here though?
She's got no choice. She's got no choice. There's the big fella walking. He's there, just there. The bull's there, just there. And that's probably her calf, that dark nose one looking underneath.
Oh, I was going to say it would be different colour. Where's the bull in here then?
He's just trying to mount something, walking behind there. See, through the gap there, behind the black cow? He's only a young bull.
So he's not huge then, is he?
Oh no, he's only young. But look at her. She's polled. She's lost it already in that black calf. But look at the growth on that.
Yes.
Look at the growth on him compared to his compatriots here.
Yes.
So that's what I'm checking all the time as a cattleman, how this bright idea is going. You know, has it got legs? And we've still got work to do.
Yeah, how quickly those horns come back.
Well, it's not just the horns, it's the growth of that calf on the same feed, the same bull genetics
Yes.
to all these others. The final story is not till he's actually eaten and hanging up to see what the carcass turned out like.
Amazing.
Yeah. But I'll take you around to show you this paddock that went gangbusters. This is a bit of the same sort of story here. I just drove through here with the spreader and that just went crazy. Again, under the trees. There's definitely something going on with the fungal connections.
I think there's a drip zone as well, isn't there?
Yeah, the drip zone's got something.
And then I presume, well, Peter Andrews talks about the low pressure and you can create your own microclimate.
Yep.
But I presume a tree would have its own little microclimate as well.
Yeah, well this used to be just a desert. Look at it. Under these trees when we got here, it was just all a desert through here. And
but yeah, the fungal content's really important.
something's happening. We use a lot of Peter's work, but we don't pull up on dealing with the creek. I've got little banks and stops all the way along that one there.
Okay.
But we don't stop there. We want to get this carbon higher on the paddocks. Now this is not long I've finished a heavy graze, and that's been planted with that same, you can see bits of lines over there,
Yes.
but now it's spreading everywhere. It's taken over in between the lines, and that's got just about everything you can imagine out there in pasture. But a big part of it for me is this chicory. It's one of the ones that really breaks through and gets the roots open and down,
Yeah.
and feeds that deep soil while being a good feed on top.